I spent 2 weeks in July at Camp David, working with Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak and PLO Chairman Yasser Arafat and their delegations, trying to reach a final peace agreement. Sadly, our efforts ended without result, but we committed to continue the work over the next 6 months. I never really expected to get an agreement at Camp David, and I was gratified that for the first time we had discussed fundamental issues and had narrowed the gaps between the two sides. I still thought there was a fair chance of getting the whole agreement done before I left office. December 23, 2000 was a fateful day for the Middle East peace process. After I invited the two sides back to Washington for a last effort at peace, and they had been negotiating for several days, my team and I became convinced that unless we narrowed the range of debate, in effect forcing the big compromises up front, there would never be an agreement. Arafat was afraid of being criticized by other Arab leaders. Barak was losing ground to Sharon at home. So I did what not long ago would have been unthinkable. I brought the Palestinian and Israeli teams into the cabinet room and read them my parameters for proceeding. These were developed after extensive private talks with the parties separately since Camp David. If they accepted them within 4 days, we would go forward. If not, we were through. On the 27th, Barak's cabinet endorsed the parameters with reservations, but all their reservations were within the parameters and therefore subject to negotiations anyway. It was historic. An Israeli government had said that to get peace there would be a Palestinian state in roughly 97% of the West Bank and all of Gaza, that the capital of the Palestinian state would be in East Jerusalem, that the Palestinians would maintain control over the Temple Mount, and would have the Christian and Muslim quarters of Jerusalem's old city. The ball was now in Arafat's court. I was calling the other Arab leaders daily to urge them to pressure Arafat to say yes. They were all impressed with Israel's acceptance and told me they believed Arafat should take the deal. I have no way of knowing what they told him, though the Saudi ambassador, Prince Bandar, later told me that he and Crown Prince Abdullah had the distinct impression Arafat was going to accept the parameters. On the 29th, Chief Negotiator Dennis Ross met with Arafat's trusted advisor Abu Allah, whom we all respected, to make absolutely sure Arafat understood the consequences of rejection. I would be gone. Ross would be gone. Barak would lose the upcoming election to Ariel Sharon, and President Bush wouldn't want to jump in after I had invested so much and failed. By the end of the year, I still hadn't heard from Arafat, so on New Year's Day, 2001, I invited him to see me at the White House the next day. Before he came, he received Prince Bandar and the Egyptian ambassador at his hotel. One of Arafat's younger aides told us they had pushed him hard to say yes. When Arafat came to see me, he asked a lot of questions about my proposal. At times he seemed confused, not wholly in command of the facts. For some time I had felt that he might not be at the top of his game any longer, after all the years of spending the night in different places to dodge assassins' bullets, all the countless hours on airplanes, all the endless hours of tension-filled talks. Or perhaps he just couldn't make the emotional jump from revolutionary to statesman. He had grown used to flying from place to place, giving mother-of-pearl gifts made by Palestinian craftsmen to world leaders, and appearing on television with them. It would be different if the end of violence took Palestine out of the headlines, and instead he had to worry about cleaning the streets and providing jobs, schools, and basic services. Most of the young people on Arafat's team wanted him to take the deal. When he left, I still had no idea what he was going to do. His body language said no, but the deal was so good I couldn't believe anyone would be foolish enough to let it go. Right before I left office, in one of our last conversations, Arafat thanked me for all my efforts and told me what a great man I was. Mr. Chairman, I replied, I am not a great man. I am a failure, and you have made me one. I had warned Arafat that he was single-handedly electing Ariel Sharon and that he would reap the whirlwind. In February, Sharon would be elected prime minister in a landslide. The Israelis had decided that if Arafat wouldn't take my offer, he wouldn't take anything, and that if they had no partner for peace in him, it was better to be led by the most aggressive, intransigent leader available. Sharon would take a hard line toward Arafat and would be supported in doing so by Ehud Barak in the United States. Nearly a year after I left office, Arafat said he was ready to negotiate on the basis of the parameters I had presented. By then, it was too late. He had an Israeli government that wouldn't give it to him, and an Israeli public that didn't trust him to keep his word. Arafat's rejection of my proposal after Barak accepted it was an error of historic proportions. The news is not all bad, though. Many Palestinians and Israelis are still committed to peace, and someday peace will come. When it does, the final agreement will look a lot like the proposals that came out of Camp David in July of 2000 and the 6 long months that followed.